My name is Jackson Myers. I'm a maintenance supervisor at Westfield High in Ohio. Been there 17 years. I fix broken doors, unjam lockers, and make sure the furnace doesn't choke when the snow hits. Simple life. Honest work. I come home to my dog, my daughter, every other weekend. And sometimes, the silence. But last Christmas, my wife, or ex-wife now, handed me divorce papers in the middle of dinner, right in front of my daughter, my sister, her parents, everyone. No warning, no dignity, just a plain white envelope she pulled out like it was dessert. She smiled like it was clever, said, "Merry Christmas, Jackson." Then she leaned back in her chair like she'd just delivered the punchline to some inside joke. Her gym buddy, the one she swore was just a trainer, had better I'd cry, said I'd fall apart, break down, that I was too soft to handle it. She told him on the phone the week before, he won't see it coming. He still thinks I love him. It's almost sad. I had been standing in the hallway when I heard her say it, holding a tray of wine glasses. I didn't drop it. I didn't shout. I just stood there, frozen, and listened to the woman I once built a home with laugh at the idea of my heartbreak. You see, when you've lived long enough with someone like Nora, you learn to freeze from the inside out. They don't hit you. They slice you. Slowly. With jokes that come with a smile. With glances that say you're not enough. With questions like, "This shirt? Really?" In front of friends. You're not bleeding, so no one thinks you're hurt. But you are. So when she handed me those papers, expecting tears or maybe some dramatic scene, all I said was, "Thank you." I signed them, quietly, deliberately. Then I reached under the table and handed her a gold-wrapped box, her real gift. She thought she had written the ending. What she didn't know was that I had been writing something too. Not revenge, preparation. The difference is subtle, but deadly. And that moment, that frozen, silent moment when she opened that box, that's when everything changed. For her, for me, for everyone watching. But to understand how we got there, we have to rewind. Not just to the moment she placed the envelope in front of me. No, further back, to the very first crack in the wall we built together. To the first time her words made me feel small. Because no one wakes up one day and says, "Today I will take back my life." It starts slower. With silence. With watching. With remembering what strength used to feel like. And then, eventually, with acting. Let me show you how I got there. The first real crack didn't come from a fight. Nora and I didn't yell. We weren't that kind of couple. We were polished. We were the kind of couple people pointed at and said, "They've got it figured out." It happened at a dinner party. Summer evening. Her real estate firm had just closed a big sale. We were hosting, outdoor patio lights strung up like a magazine photo shoot. Nora did most of the decorating. She was good at that, curating appearances. She looked incredible that night. Red dress, hair pinned up, that smile she saved for clients and closings. I was standing by the grill, flipping steaks, when one of her colleagues, I think his name was Mike, made a joke about working late and burning out. Nora laughed, sipped her wine, then looked right at me and said, "Jackson doesn't burn out. He barely even turns on." The table burst into laughter. I smiled. Of course I did. That's what you're supposed to do, right? Keep the peace. Be a good sport. I flipped the steak again and said, "Well, someone's got to stay cool under pressure." They laughed more. She clinked her glass against mine. The moment moved on. But I remember how her voice sounded when she said it. Sweet, casual, not angry, not cruel, just amused. That's how it always started. You don't recognize the damage when it doesn't come with volume. You tell yourself it's harmless. You tell yourself she's tired, that she didn't mean it. But you remember it. Your body remembers it. The way your chest tightens for half a second. The way your hand pauses before it reaches for the salt. The way your eyes scan the table to see if anyone else noticed. They didn't. Or maybe they did, and just looked away. I didn't say anything that night. Not to her. Not to anyone. But I remember clearing the plates later and seeing her laughing with her co-workers. I watched her brush hair from her cheek, toss back her head, drink like someone who had everything exactly how she wanted it. I stood by the sink, washing dishes by hand. Not because the dishwasher was broken, it wasn't, but because I needed the rhythm, the warm water, the excuse not to be part of the celebration. That was the first time I didn't feel like her husband. I felt like her backdrop. That red dress she wore that night. She never wore it again. Said it felt too tight. I knew the truth. She didn't need it anymore. She didn't need me anymore, either. Not the version of me I had built with my hands and sweat and loyalty. The worst part wasn't the joke. It was how natural it came to her, as if she'd said it before, maybe not out loud, but in her head, over and over, until one day it just slipped out in front of a dozen people like it meant nothing. But it wasn't nothing. It was the beginning, a hairline fracture in a foundation I thought was solid. And the thing about cracks is, they never fix themselves. They spread, quietly, slowly, until one day the whole thing caves in. You just have to decide whether you'll be underneath it when it does, or already walking away. I'm not the kind of man who knows what to say in a fight. You know the type, the quick ones. The sharp-tongued men who always have a comeback, who win arguments like it's sport. That's not me. Never was. When I was a kid, my mom used to say I was born steady. Not smart-mouthed, not bold, just steady. I fixed what broke. I waited my turn. I said please and thank you, even when no one taught me to. I never saw that as a weakness. Still don't. I'm the guy you call when the garage door won't close, or when your furnace clicks but won't catch. I don't panic. I listen. I test the wires. I trace the line. I don't shout at broken things. I repair them. That's how I approached marriage, too. When something felt off, I didn't accuse. I adjusted. When she was cold, I pulled the blanket higher. When she was sharp, I dulled my edges. When she rolled her eyes in front of our friends, I laughed it off and made sure her drink was full. I wasn't trying to be a doormat. I was trying to keep the peace. I thought that was love. People like me, we're not flashy. We don't make grand speeches. We don't post long monologues on social media. We show up. We shut up. We handle things. You can go years living that way, believing that effort will equals value. That if you just keep trying, keep giving, keep waiting, something will shift. They'll see you, appreciate you, choose you again. But what you learn, slowly, is this. Not everyone wants steady. Some people want chaos with a good smile. Some people confuse loyalty with laziness. And some people, like Nora, outgrow you without ever saying a word. That's the part that sneaks up on you. You wake up one day and realize you haven't been hugged with real warmth in months. That she kisses you goodbye, but not goodnight. That every compliment you give lands like static. She hears it, but doesn't feel it. And still, you stay. You don't stay because you're weak. You stay because walking away from something you built feels like failure. Even if it's already burning, you stay, trying to put it out with your bare hands. That was me, Jackson Myers, the good guy, the one her parents liked because I held doors and always called them Mr. and Mrs. Harmon, the one her friends called solid, like stone, like furniture, like something that doesn't need to be noticed to be useful. But here's the truth. I never said out loud until it was over. Being dependable is not the same as being loved. Being calm doesn't mean I don't feel. And being quiet, it doesn't mean I didn't notice every single shift, every sigh, every rolled eye, every late night she didn't bother to explain. I noticed. I just didn't react, because reacting gives them the story they want. The one where you're unreasonable, where you're insecure, where you're too sensitive. So instead, I waited, I listened, and I remembered. I'm not the kind of man who throws plates or storms out or makes scenes, but I'm the kind of man who knows how to rebuild a house, and when I finally decided to tear ours down, I made damn sure she'd never forget who laid the last brick. It was a Tuesday, late November, cold enough that my knees reminded me I wasn't 30 anymore. I came home from work with a bag of groceries and a six-pack of that local beer Nora always used to like, even though I had the growing suspicion she didn't like much about me anymore. I walked through the front door and heard her laugh before I even got my boots off. Not the fake, polite kind she gave me when I made a joke about my bald spot. This one was real, effortless. I followed the sound to the kitchen, expecting her to be on a call with her sister or someone from work. But the way her voice softened, dropped a little, like she was trying not to be overheard, made me stop in the hallway. I didn't mean to listen. Not at first. I paused, just for a second, just to hear who she was talking to. And then, I couldn't move. Her voice, low and sweet, said, "Christmas morning, right after the toast. He's gonna be surrounded by family. Perfect timing." A pause, then another laugh. "He still thinks I'm planning a trip for the three of us in January. I swear, Jared, he's clueless." Jared. That name landed like a punch. I knew it. The so-called trainer from the gym. The one who texted her during dinner, whose name came up every time she said she was working on herself. I stood there with a bag of lettuce in one hand and a carton of eggs in the other, suddenly feeling like the idiot in a scene I didn't audition for. "He's going to cry," she said, and I could hear the grin in her voice. "He won't say anything, of course. That's the thing about Jackson. He absorbs." Then, softer. "But I bet he breaks. Quietly. Right there in front of everyone." I didn't flinch. Not then. I couldn't afford to. My legs froze. My chest went still. I was nothing but ears and breath. She ended the call with, "I love you. Talk later." And just like that, I knew two things for sure. One, my wife was planning to blindside me with divorce papers on Christmas Day. Two, she thought I would crumble. And here's the part that still sticks with me. She didn't sound angry, or conflicted, or even sad. She sounded entertained, like it was a prank, like I was just a setup to her punchline. I walked quietly to the kitchen, placed the groceries on the counter, and said nothing. Not that night, not the next. But in that moment, that exact moment, something shifted inside me. I wasn't hurt. Not yet. I was calculating. Because if she wanted a performance on Christmas, I'd make sure she got one, just not the one she rehearsed. I met Halverson on a Thursday. Cold, gray, forgettable. His office sat behind a pawn shop and a dental lab that hadn't changed its faded signage since the early 90s. The kind of place no one brags about walking into, which was exactly why I went there. He used to be a prosecutor back in the day, then switched to family law after his wife left him for her yoga instructor and tried to take the dog, the car, and half his retirement. I figured he'd understand the terrain. Lena, my sister, made the call for me. She used to work with him years ago when she was still in the force. She didn't ask questions, just handed me a card and said, "If you're gonna bleed, bleed into strategy." I sat in his office with my hands folded like I was back in school. Halverson didn't offer coffee, didn't waste time with small talk. He leaned back in his worn leather chair, glasses halfway down his nose, and asked, "You looking to make her pay, or just survive this clean?" I told him the truth. I don't want revenge. I want the ground beneath my feet to stop shaking. He nodded like he'd heard that before, maybe from himself. I pulled out a folded napkin, the one Nora had signed a year ago during a dinner party when I had jokingly said, "We should get a post-nup if you keep shopping like that." She laughed. "What? You think I'm after your pension?" Then she scribbled her signature right there beside her wine glass, trying to be cute. What she didn't know was that I had slid that napkin into a file folder the next morning. And a week later, I'd had it notarized, just in case. Halverson read it silently. Then he set it down and smiled. A small, thin smile that said, "This just got interesting." "You have timing," he said, tapping the paper. "And timing is leverage." Over the next hour, we mapped out the skeleton of a strategy. Not just divorce, positioned divorce, legally documented infidelity, custody groundwork, financial tracing. He gave me a list of things to start collecting: receipts, statements, travel records, patterns. He said, "Emotion doesn't win cases. Documentation does." That night, I bought a new journal. Not the leather kind, not pretty. Just a plain, spiral notebook. Inside, I wrote down the first entry. November 28th. Heard phone call. Confirmed intent to file without notice. Emotional tone. Mocking. I tucked it beneath my side of the mattress and slept on the edge of the bed, facing the wall. Nora came in late. She smelled like that cologne I used to wear in my 20s, the one she said gave her headaches. I didn't ask where she'd been. I didn't touch her. I just whispered to the ceiling, "You go ahead and bet on my breakdown." Because while she was planning her performance, I was designing the stage, and when the curtain fell, I was going to make sure the spotlight landed right where it belonged. Not on the woman who handed me papers, but on the man who signed them and handed them back with a smile. There was a time when Nora used to wait for me at the window. I'd pull into the driveway after work, and there she'd be, leaning on the sill, hair tied back, eyes tired, but soft. She never waved, just smiled, like she'd been counting the minutes. I remember once she mouthed the words, "home," as I stepped out of the truck. That memory hits different now, like a photograph left too long in the sun, still visible, but faded at the corners. Some nights, I try to trace back to when things shifted. Not the obvious stuff, the cold looks, the late nights. Earlier, smaller, like the way she stopped making coffee for two, or how the we in our conversation started turning into I. I think I'm going to Florida in March. I've decided we should repaint the dining room. I don't feel like hosting this year. And just like that, I became a +1 in my own marriage. Present, but not considered. Useful, but not needed. We used to dance in the kitchen, back when the radio still worked. Some silly two-step thing we made up one night after too much wine and a burned lasagna. She laughed so hard, she snorted. I remember thinking, God, I hope I never forget this sound. I haven't heard her laugh like that in years. Funny thing is, there was no fight, no slammed doors, no cheating scandal, Not then, anyway. Just a slow leak. 1,000 skipped touches. 100 conversations that ended with, "Never mind." Love doesn't always leave in rage. Sometimes it just stops refilling the glass. And I kept trying to carry it. Alone. Because I believed in vows. In seasons. In the kind of love that doesn't throw in the towel when the sheets go cold. But Nora, she wasn't built for stillness. She craved spark, applause. And I was just the quiet man who remembered to check the smoke detectors. Somewhere along the way, I stopped being her person and became her placeholder. And yet, I never left. Not because I was weak, but because I believed the tide might turn. That maybe if I worked harder, got home earlier, complimented her more, the window might light up again when I pulled into the drive. It didn't. And when I overheard that phone call, the one where she laughed about betting on my pain, it wasn't anger that hit me first. It was grief, not for the woman she was, but for the man I used to be, the one who believed her love could outlast the silence. That night, I sat in the dark with a photo album from our early years. She looked happy in those pictures. So did I. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just ran my finger along the edge of a photo, one where we were standing on the beach, holding hands, barefoot in the cold sand. And I whispered something I'd never said aloud before. We were good, once, but I don't think you remember that version of us anymore. The hardest part wasn't losing her. It was realizing she'd already left, long before I ever knew I should start packing. After that night, I stopped asking questions, not because I didn't care, but because I already knew the answers. She started coming home later. First it was meetings, then it was traffic, then it was something vague like, "You know how it is." I nodded. Of course I did. But what she didn't know was that I had started tracking every excuse. She left a trail. Most people do when they think no one's watching. Perfume that wasn't hers, new passwords on her phone, a dry cleaning tag from a place across town we'd never used. Her gym bag smelled like cologne I hadn't worn in a decade. She claimed it was eucalyptus. It wasn't. I never raised my voice, never followed her, never even touched her phone. What I did was smarter, quieter, legal. I synced our shared calendar to a cloud backup. I started taking pictures of receipts left in coat pockets, forwarded emails she left open on the shared laptop to an account only I could access. She still thought I was the same man folding her laundry and picking up her prescriptions. And I was. Only now, I was also the man building a file. Some people think strength means confrontation. But I've learned the most dangerous kind of strength is the one that doesn't flinch. It just watches. She mistook my silence for softness. But it wasn't softness. It was strategy. Let her get comfortable. Let her believe I was still in the dark. The more she underestimated me, the sloppier she got. One night, she walked in wearing lipstick. I hadn't seen her wear any in months. I didn't say a word, just looked at her face a second too long. She caught my glance and said, "Don't start." So I didn't. I went back to my book, nodded once, and left her to fill in the silence with her own guilt. Or maybe not guilt, just annoyance that I wasn't reacting the way she expected. It became a routine. She'd lie. I'd log it. She'd deflect. I'd document. Every interaction, every look, every stray remark. I wrote it down. Dates, times, emotionless, like a report. The kind of report that matters in court. Not feelings. Facts. It was lonely, yes, but not nearly as lonely as trying to convince someone to love you again when they've already given your place in their heart to someone else. I wasn't trying to win her back. I was getting ready to let her go, on my terms. Because when someone believes they're 5 steps ahead, they rarely look behind them. And that's where I was. Not broken, not boiling. Just quietly walking the path she thought she had all to herself. Waiting for the right time to turn on the light and show her I had been there the whole way. Silent, steady, watching. It was a Saturday morning when Ellie handed me the drawing. She had been sitting at the kitchen table, feet swinging under her chair, tongue sticking out just a little, the way it always did when she was focused. Crayons scattered everywhere. She'd been quiet for almost an hour, something rare for an 8-year-old with a sugar high from blueberry waffles. I was washing dishes when she tugged on my sleeve and said, "Daddy, look." The paper was a simple landscape. A house, 2 people in front, a tree with crooked branches. She had labeled us in block letters. Dad on the left, Mom on the right. But what caught me wasn't the labels. It was the sky. Over my side of the house, the sky was blue, clear, with a bright yellow sun in the corner and a few birds flying. Over Nora's side, it was gray, jagged scribbles. A black cloud hung above her head with tiny blue lines drawn straight down. "Is it raining just on Mom?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. Ellie shrugged. "She's always tired," she said, not looking up. Then added, "And kinda mad all the time." I nodded slowly, folding the dish towel over the oven handle. "Do you think she's mad at you?" I asked gently. She paused, then shook her head. "I think she's mad, even when nobody's around." That hit harder than it should have. Kids notice everything, especially the things you try to hide. I stared at the drawing a long time after she went back to her crayons. It wasn't angry. It wasn't dramatic. It was just true. There I was, smiling under the sun. There she was, standing stiff beneath a storm cloud. And our house, right in the middle, split by the weather. I didn't cry. I didn't crumble. I just folded the drawing in half, gently, and slid it into the back of my journal, the one where I'd been logging receipts and remarks. Not because it was evidence, but because it was a reminder, not of her cruelty, but of what was at stake. Ellie wasn't drawing a picture. She was giving me permission to stop pretending, to stop playing happy while the roof sagged over our heads, to fix what I could and let go of what I couldn't. And maybe, just maybe, to finally be the man she thought she was drawing under that sun. That night, after Ellie went to bed, I took the drawing back out. I sat on the edge of the couch, the house dark except for the light over the stove humming in the kitchen. I unfolded the paper slowly, careful not to crease it any more than I already had. I looked at it, again. Really looked. The line dividing the sky, blue on one side, storm on the other, wasn't a mistake. It ran right through the middle of the roof, right through the heart of the house, like Ellie had seen something neither of us had the guts to admit out loud. She knew. And I hated that. Not because it made things harder, but because it made things clearer. I always told myself I was staying for her, that keeping the peace meant keeping the home whole. That if I could just absorb the tension, swallow the insults, keep smiling through the storms, she'd be protected. But what kind of protection is that, really? Teaching your daughter that silence is the answer, that love is supposed to feel like walking on eggshells, that fathers are meant to endure and mothers are meant to leave the room angry without explaining why. No, that wasn't what I wanted her to grow up believing. I reached for the drawer in the hallway cabinet, the one we used for pens, batteries, and old birthday cards, and pulled out a manila folder. Inside were utility bills and insurance notices, the mundane things that hold a life together. I slid the drawing in between 2 pages. Then I stood there a moment, hand resting on the folder, unsure what I was grieving more, the family we used to be, or the illusion I'd kept alive for so long. I closed the drawer slowly. No slam, no dramatic gesture, just a quiet seal on a small act of letting go. That was the night I stopped waiting for Nora to notice me, stopped hoping for the soft return of the woman I married. She wasn't coming back, not really. The woman who once waited at the window had been replaced by someone else, someone who smiled to my face and texted another man from the bathroom, who signed Christmas cards with my last name while planning how to leave it behind. And me? I wasn't angry. Not then. That would come later, cold and quiet like winter air. But in that moment, I just felt still, like standing in an empty church after the service ends. The light through the stained glass still falls, but the echo is gone. I went into the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water, stared at the faucet while it ran, then shut it off before it overflowed. A reflex, maybe a metaphor. Before bed, I checked on Ellie. She was curled up, one hand under her cheek, breathing slow and even. I stood there longer than I should have, wondering how long she'd known. If she had drawn the sky like that because she saw it every day, or because she felt it herself. I kissed her forehead, pulled the blanket up to her chin. And for the first time in a long time, I whispered something not to her, but to myself. You don't have to fix everything, but you do have to stop pretending it's not broken. Then I turned off the light and left the drawing folded, not forgotten, just remembered enough to mean something. The lie came wrapped in business casual. She told me she'd be flying out for a real estate summit in Atlanta, a 3-day event, client-facing, back-to-back panels. Said she'd be too busy to talk much, and that her hotel had spotty Wi-Fi. I nodded, told her to be safe, helped her zip her suitcase. But even before the front door closed behind her, I already knew. Not because I had proof, not yet, but because when someone lies with routine, you start to hear the rhythm, and her rhythm was too smooth. She left on a Thursday morning, said she'd land by noon. At 2:17 p.m., I got a text. Landed, exhausted, going straight to sleep. But her flight, the one I quietly looked up, didn't arrive until 3:05. I didn't reply. That evening, I logged into the shared rewards account we had for hotel points. She'd booked a room at a boutique hotel in Asheville, not Atlanta. King bed, spa service, wine package add-on, checked in as N. Harmon, her maiden name. I took a screenshot. Friday morning, her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. She'd forgotten to turn off her Bluetooth sync, and it connected automatically to our home speaker system. A message popped up from a contact labeled only with a capital J. Breakfast in bed, or should I bring the coffee to the tub? I didn't flinch, just stood there with my coffee, listening to the silence of a house she thought she'd escaped from. I forwarded the message to my encrypted email folder, added it to the growing file. Later that day, I found the dry cleaning receipt stuffed into the pocket of a jacket she hadn't taken. On it, a note. Steam dress plus remove lipstick from collar. The date? 3 days before her summit. That night, I pulled out my journal and wrote, December 3rd, timeline mismatch, false flight time, hotel discrepancy. External message from J confirms physical presence with third party. Emotional status, controlled. Objective, clarity. I closed the notebook and set it gently back under the mattress. No anger, no anxiety, just the hum of something tightening. Not in my chest, but in my focus. You see, lies aren't just about what's said. They're about how much effort the other person assumes you won't make. And Nora? She had spent years believing I didn't notice details, that I lived in a fog of routine: coffee, work boots, toolbox, home. She forgot that people like me don't need to raise our voices to be dangerous. We don't need to react. We just need to remember. Because the truth always leaks, through receipts, through timesheets, through careless text messages. All I had to do was stay still long enough to watch it drip. And it was dripping now. Steady, inevitable, right into my hands. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house was too quiet, too cold. Not in temperature, but in feeling. The kind of cold that seeps into your chest when you finally stop pretending you're not alone. I threw on my coat, grabbed the spare keys, and got in the truck. Didn't know where I was going. I just needed to move, to get away from her pillow still holding the shape of someone who'd lied with her head resting on it for years. The snow had started. Light flurries drifting across the windshield as I drove with no music, no heat. Just the sound of tires crunching over frozen pavement and the slow rhythm of my breath. I took the long route through back roads outside town, the ones that snake through fields gone brown for the season. I passed the old barn where we once took Christmas card photos, back when Ellie was just a toddler wrapped in a scarf too big for her. I pulled over at a small turnout near Miller's Creek, left the engine running, and sat there, hands still on the wheel. No yelling, no punching the dash, no shouting her name into the empty night like a wounded animal. Just breathing. It would have felt more cinematic to break down, to scream, to cry, to let it all out in one glorious explosion of heartbreak. But that's not how real endings feel. Not the ones that come slow and silent. They don't crash. They settle, like snow. I stared at the creek, thought about how water doesn't fight rocks. It goes around them, wears them down without noise. And eventually the rock changes, not because it gave in, but because it didn't move. That's what I felt like. The rock. Still. Quiet. Unmoving. But not unchanged. I thought about the first time I told Nora I loved her. I was 28. She had just gotten her real estate license and had made her first big sale, a house with a broken porch and wild roses climbing up the mailbox. She was so proud. She kissed me that night, like I was the reason she had made it. Told me, "You make me feel safe." I hadn't thought about that night in years. And now, sitting in the dark with frost building on the windshield, I realized she hadn't said anything like that in a long time. Not since the safety started to bore her. That was the moment I finally let go. Not of her, but of the version of her I'd been carrying in my head. The woman I still defended in my silence. The woman I told myself might come back if I was just patient enough. She wasn't coming back. She had already packed herself up and left. All that remained was the echo of a goodbye she never had the decency to say out loud. I put the truck in drive and started heading home. I wasn't empty. I wasn't angry. I was just done. Done hoping. Done fixing what was never mine to repair. Done loving someone who only loved the idea of being adored. And as I drove through the quiet streets of my neighborhood, past glowing windows and wreaths hung neatly on front doors, I said the words I needed to hear, soft, under my breath, just for me. This doesn't break me. It frees me. Then I turned onto my street and didn't look back. Nora had a pattern. It wasn't just in her lies. It was in the way she'd test the edges of what she could get away with, gently, like pressing on a bruise. If I didn't flinch, she'd push a little harder next time. The first time she stayed out late and said it was just drinks with clients, I asked her if she'd eaten. The second time, I didn't ask anything. She noticed, and she adjusted. That's how people like her work. Not with explosions, but with erosion. They watch your boundaries wear down, then act surprised when the fence finally gives way. But here's what she never realized. I wasn't crumbling. I was cataloging. Every word she threw like it meant nothing, I logged it. Every shrug when I asked how her day was, I noted it. Every new blouse she claimed was from a client appreciation gift, photographed, time-stamped, quietly stored. She must have thought I was numb. She started making comments louder, snapping more often. "You'd die without me," she said once, pouring herself wine like it was just Tuesday. I didn't argue. I just nodded and rinsed the dish I was holding. But inside, I was writing it down. It became a ritual, a quiet kind of discipline. I didn't push back, because that would give her something to twist, something she could point to and say, "See, he's the problem." I gave her no such luxury. Instead, I became predictable. Calm. Boring, even. She saw it as surrender, but it wasn't. It was structure. It was strategy. It was the scaffolding of a case she wouldn't see coming. Every night she came home late, I folded her coat, smoothed it out, checked the pockets. Every time she laughed too hard at a text and turned the screen away, I smiled gently and left the room. And every time I felt that ache, the one that said, "Speak up, say something, demand the truth," I swallowed it down and put another line in the journal. Because silence, in the right hands, isn't weakness. It's preparation. And repetition? Repetition isn't always resignation. Sometimes it's rehearsal. And I was rehearsing the moment I would no longer be quiet. Not with shouting, not with threats, but with evidence, with dates, with legal ink and courtroom language. She thought she was winning because I wasn't fighting. But that's the thing about poker. Sometimes the quietest player is holding the strongest hand, and they're just waiting for the table to go still. It was a Tuesday when I sat down at Lena's kitchen table with a stack of folders and a thermos of black coffee. She didn't ask what was inside the folders. She just pushed a yellow legal pad toward me and said, "Let's get to work." Lena had always been sharper than me, smarter, faster, more skeptical of people. She used to be a cop before she left the force and became a paralegal. Said it was the same truth, just less blood and more paperwork. She never liked Nora, never trusted that polished smile and rehearsed charm. But she never said a word until I was ready to hear it. And when I was, she didn't gloat. She just showed up. We went through every receipt, every timestamp, every journal entry I had made over the last 6 months. Lena flagged the ones that could be verified, corroborated, strengthened. "You're not just building a case," she said, "Choma. You're building a timeline. Judges don't rule on emotion. They rule on sequence. You give them a clean narrative. They can't ignore it." We drafted a declaration. Nothing dramatic, just facts. Nora's absences, her hotel stays under aliases, the synced cloud backups, the recorded messages, her attempt to file divorce papers after violating the post-nup, that napkin she signed a year ago. We found the footage on my old outdoor camera. I'd forgotten it was even recording that night, her laughing, signing it next to the fire pit while holding a glass of wine. Lena stared at the grainy footage on her laptop and whistled. "She signed this with a smile," she said. "She thought it was a joke," I replied. "Well, now it's law." We added an addendum, drafted by Mr. Halverson himself, that reinforced the original terms. Infidelity nullifies spousal claim. Custody remains with primary caregiver. Financial penalties apply if deception is proven. No drama, no insults, Just clarity. Legal, binding, simple. It took us 6 hours to finish organizing everything. When we were done, Lena looked at the stack and said, "This is airtight." I nodded, but I didn't feel relief. Not yet. I felt still, anchored, like standing at the edge of something wide and final. That night, before I left, Lena handed me a flash drive and said, "Backup of the backup, just in case she plays dirty." I tucked it into my coat pocket. I was ready now, not for revenge, but for dignity, for a clean break, for the ability to walk away without her rewriting the story. She had spent years shaping the narrative, that I was quiet, passive, easy to dismiss, that I wouldn't fight, wouldn't notice, wouldn't matter. But paper doesn't lie. Dates don't stutter. Proof doesn't flinch. And when the time came, when she handed me those divorce papers, smug and certain, I would hand her this file and let the truth speak louder than she ever had. She was good at pretending. Nora could perform domestic happiness like it was a client pitch, effortless, polished, believable. And with Christmas approaching, she slipped into that role like a designer coat. Tree decorated to perfection. No sentimental ornaments, just color-coordinated spheres and gold-trimmed ribbons. The dining table set 2 weeks early, cloth napkins, matching flatware, a centerpiece that smelled like cinnamon and money. She even started calling me Babe again in front of Ellie. "Babe, can you help me with these lights?" "Babe, your mom said she's bringing the ham, right?" It sounded foreign coming out of her mouth, like a word she'd rehearsed but didn't feel. Ellie, of course, noticed none of it. Kids don't always know what's real, but they know what feels off. She kept asking if we'd all open presents together this year. I said yes, and meant it. Just didn't tell her what kind of presents were coming. The week before Christmas, Nora hosted a dinner for her parents and mine. Small talk, laughter, wine. She wore a green velvet dress I hadn't seen in years, the same one she wore the night we got engaged. I doubt she remembered that. At one point, she leaned over and touched my hand across the table. Just a light graze, enough for the others to notice. I played along, smiled, because that was the game, and I wasn't done playing it yet. She had no idea I'd already filed the counterpetition. No idea the post-nup had been recertified, logged, and delivered to the courthouse 3 days earlier. No idea I had made peace with letting her go, and taking everything she thought she'd get away with. She still thought she was in control. Still thought I was walking into the trap she'd set with a white envelope and a cruel little smile. Let her think that. Let her perform. It was her stage after all. I just adjusted the lighting. Later that night, as we cleaned up the dishes, she handed me a mug of spiced cider and said, "You've been so calm lately. It's nice." I nodded, trying to appreciate the season. She clinked her glass against mine. "Maybe next year will be a fresh start." I almost laughed. Almost. But I just took a sip and said, "Maybe it will." She smiled, thinking she'd won. And I let her keep thinking that. Because the thing about pretending is, it only works when you forget the other person can pretend too. And I had learned from the best. So I smiled back, washed the dishes, turned off the lights, said goodnight, all the while counting the days. Not to Christmas, but to the performance she didn't know she was walking into. The final act, the real finale, where I wouldn't just be the quiet man at the table, I'd be the one holding the script. There's a kind of silence that feels heavy, like a punishment. The kind where you're left wondering what you did wrong, what you should have said, how you could have made it right. I'd known that silence for years. But this silence, this one was different. It wasn't the kind that came from fear. It came from control. It was mine. Every word I didn't say in those final days before Christmas was intentional. Every nod, every neutral response, every tight-lipped smile, all of it chosen with care. Because the truth was already moving beneath the surface, and I wasn't going to risk it by showing my hand too early. I moved through the house like a man content, not because I was, but because that's what she expected. That's what she needed to see to stay confident, careless, and predictable. I let her think I was stable because she assumed stability meant inaction. She didn't notice how closely I watched the calendar, didn't catch the way I avoided eye contact every time she hinted at her fresh start, didn't feel the shift in the way I touched her, not with affection, but with finality. Even the small things changed. I stopped trying to win her over with kind gestures. No more surprise coffees on her desk. No more checking her car tires when the temperature dropped. I stopped filling in the emotional blanks for her. Instead, I observed. One night, she stood in front of the mirror, trying on earrings for the firm's Christmas party, a party that didn't exist. I helped her clasp the necklace she'd picked, and when she turned to look at me, expecting a compliment, I just said, "You look ready, not beautiful, not radiant, just ready." She didn't catch it, because people like her only hear what confirms the story they've written in their heads. And her story? It ended with her delivering the final blow. Me. Stunned. Ruined. Broken. But my story was different. My story didn't end in silence. It just started there. Lena once told me, "The most dangerous man in the room is the one who says the least, because you never know how far ahead he's thinking." She was right. So I said nothing. Not when Nora asked me what I wanted for Christmas. Not when she teased that I was being mysterious lately. Not even when I caught a glimpse of a new suitcase in the guest room, tagged and packed for what she thought would be her getaway. I let her plan, let her set the scene, let her tighten the noose she didn't realize she was slipping around her own neck. Because I had everything I needed. The documents, the timestamps, the law, and the truth, and the beauty of silence, real silence, is that when it finally breaks, it sounds like justice. And she was only days away from hearing it ring. Christmas came with snow, light, fluffy, like something out of a catalog. Nora made sure everything looked perfect. The kind of perfect you plan, not feel. Candles lined the table. She placed pine cones in glass bowls like she'd seen on Pinterest. The roast was in the oven, wine chilling in a silver bucket, and the playlist she made, cozy holiday vibes, drifted from the speakers. She looked radiant. That's the word people would use. Confident, effortless, polished. A woman in control. Our daughter, Ellie, was buzzing with energy, bouncing between rooms, showing off her glitter glue Christmas card to every adult who smiled just enough to pretend they understood the scribbles. Lena arrived first. She gave me a look. Subtle. Sharp. Just a flick of her eyes that said, "You ready?" I nodded. Then came Nora's parents, chipper as always, unaware they were about to witness a quiet kind of history. My mom followed, arms full of gifts and her famous gingerbread cake that always leaned to one side. Laughter filled the house. Glasses clinked. Jokes passed between relatives. Nora played the role effortlessly, laughing at every story, brushing invisible lint off my shoulder like we were still us. She even kissed my cheek in front of everyone. I let her. I moved through the night like a man content, refilling glasses, checking the turkey, complimenting the wine she picked, even though I knew she bought it with Jared 2 weeks earlier. The script was moving forward, just the way she wrote it. But she didn't realize I had made edits. I watched her glide across the room like she was hosting her victory. She'd set the scene so carefully, waited for the audience, chosen the timing. She was proud of herself, I could tell, but pride makes you sloppy. And while she basked in her last few moments of certainty, I waited, because the beauty of justice, real justice, is that it doesn't interrupt. It lets the performance finish. It waits for the curtain call. And the show hadn't even started yet. After dinner, Nora tapped her glass with a spoon. Not too loud, just enough to quiet the room. "I know we've already unwrapped presents," she began, standing beside me with a wide, practiced smile. "But I've got one more, just for Jackson." The room murmured with curiosity. Ellie was asleep upstairs. The fire crackled behind us. Her parents watched with warm expectation. Mine looked a bit confused. Lena's face didn't move, not even a flicker. Nora reached into the sideboard drawer. Not a gift bag, no box, just a white envelope. She walked over, deliberate, and placed it in front of me on the table like it was a check she was cashing. "Merry Christmas, babe." I stared at it for a second. Not too long. Long enough to let her think I was shocked. Then I smiled. Calm. Even. I opened the envelope slowly, pulled out the papers. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Already signed by her. Already filed. The highlighted section near the bottom told me she expected a reaction. Tears, maybe. Or begging. She bet I'd cry. She bet wrong. I reached into my inner jacket pocket, took out my pen. The same pen I'd used to sign the counter-petition with my attorney 2 weeks earlier. The same one I used to sign the custody documentation, and the amended post-nup. I uncapped it, leaned forward, and signed the divorce papers. One clean stroke, no hesitation, no commentary. Then I dated it, capped the pen, and looked up at her. "That's it?" she asked. She blinked, confused. Just slightly. I nodded, folding the envelope and sliding it back across the table. "That's it." The room was dead silent. Someone's fork clinked against a plate. Her father looked like he didn't know whether to smile or look concerned. Then I reached under the table and pulled out my own gift. A flat, gold-wrapped box. I placed it gently in front of her, right beside her untouched wine glass. Her brows furrowed. "What's this?" she asked. "Your gift," I said. "The real one." She hesitated, but she couldn't resist. She tore through the wrapping with hands just a little too eager. Inside was a black leather folder. She opened it. The moment she saw the first page, her face changed. The notarized post-nuptial agreement, her signature, her handwriting. Dated, sealed, stamped. She flipped through the updated addendum, one page at a time, and by the third clause, her lips parted, but no words came out. I leaned in slightly. "You remember that night last year by the fire pit? The wine? The joke you made about protecting your designer shoe collection?" She swallowed hard. "You gave me a gift back then," I said softly. "I'm just returning the favor." Her hand gripped the edge of the folder. "What is this?" her mother asked, her voice tight. But Nora couldn't answer. Not yet. Because she was still reading. Still realizing. And the woman who just minutes earlier bet I'd crumble now sat frozen, holding the legal evidence that everything she'd built her exit plan on was already gone. She thought she had delivered the final act, but the real show had just begun. For a moment, the room stood still. Nora stared at the open folder like it might burst into flames. She blinked, then blinked again, her breath catching ever so slightly. The legal language was dense, but she wasn't stupid. She understood. Oh, she understood exactly what she was looking at. "What is this?" she asked again, but this time her voice was different, smaller. I leaned back in my chair and folded my hands on the table. "It's the postnup you signed 11 months ago," I said, quietly, calmly. "Remember? That wine-soaked night by the fire pit when you told me marriage is just a formality if the love is real? You were the one who insisted it was just paperwork. You said it wasn't real," she stammered. "You said we'd never need it." "No," I replied, locking eyes with her. "You said that. I just didn't correct you." There was a quiet gasp from across the table. Nora's mother, I think. I didn't turn to check. My eyes were steady on her. "This agreement," I continued, tapping the folder gently, "was reviewed by 2 lawyers, notarized, and in accordance with state law, voluntarily signed with 0 coercion. We even filmed a statement." You were laughing. Lena, who had been silent all evening, cleared her throat. She reached into her bag and slid a small envelope across the table toward Nora. "Certified copies," she said, "with timestamps, metadata, and backup files submitted last week." Nora didn't touch it. She just stared at it, like it might bite her. "I filed first, Jackson," she said, her voice rising, as if volume might override the facts. "Yes," I nodded, "but your filing doesn't negate the agreement. In fact, it activates it." She stood up slowly. "You tricked me." "No," I replied, still seated, still steady. "I protected myself." Another beat of silence. Then I reached into my pocket again, this time pulling out something smaller, lighter, a photograph. I placed it face down in front of her. She hesitated, then flipped it over. It was a sonogram. 8 weeks. Dated. Real. Her face crumbled. Not dramatically, not with tears. Just a twitch in the corner of her eye. The sound of her composure beginning to crack. "I didn't want this to be public," I said, not unkindly. "But you made your move tonight, in front of family. Friends. You wanted a scene. So here it is." She sat back down. Slowly. I looked around the table. My mother's eyes were wide, her hand covering her mouth. Nora's father looked away. Lena stared like a hawk. "I'm not doing this to embarrass you," I said. "This isn't about revenge." I turned to Nora. "This is about boundaries. You crossed every one. With lies, with games, with someone named Jared who thinks he knows me. But he doesn't. You don't." Her eyes widened at the name. I smiled faintly. "Yes, I know." I took a breath. "I'm not angry. I'm not here to shout or blame or demand anything. The papers speak for themselves. You handed me the match. I simply lit it, carefully, legally, without theatrics." "And the baby?" she asked, almost whispering. "I'll protect them," I said simply. "And myself." I stood up slowly, pushing in my chair. "You said once I'd be nothing without you." I let that sit for a second, then added, "But I'm everything I am because I survived you." And with that, I turned to the table, still stunned into silence, and said gently, "Anyone want dessert? The pie's warm. Apple, just the way Ellie likes it." No one answered, and I didn't need them to. The moment had already landed. The truth was out. And justice, the quiet, lawful, final kind, had already arrived wrapped in gold paper, signed in black ink, and delivered with a calm voice Nora never saw coming. Nora didn't yell. She didn't throw the papers, didn't deny the signatures, didn't storm upstairs like a soap opera villain. She just sat there. The color drained from her face, slowly at first, like a candle dimming without wind. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed again. Nothing came out. Not a word. Not even a breath heavy enough to count as resistance. Her fingers stayed on the sonogram, still and pale. The same hands that once held mine during Ellie's first fever. The same hands that signed away her leverage without reading the fine print. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She unraveled, quietly, completely, like thread slipping through a loose seam. Across the table, someone coughed. Chairs shifted. The moment was thick with unspoken things. But Nora, she didn't meet my eyes again, just stared at the edge of the folder like it might offer her a way out. But it didn't, and for once, for the first time in years, she had nothing left to say. The day after New Year's, I woke up to silence. Not the tense kind that used to live in the walls, not the silence of waiting for a door to slam, or a phone to buzz with the name Jared on the screen. No. This was something else. Stillness, with room to breathe. I got up early. Ellie was still asleep, curled up in her flannel blankets with one leg hanging off the bed, just like I used to do as a kid. I made coffee. Real coffee. Not the cheap instant kind Nora used to buy to cut back. I drank it slow, standing by the kitchen window, watching the frost melt off the swing set. The yard looked tired. A patchy lawn, a cracked patio, plastic toys faded by sun and years. I decided then, we'd build something better. Not to erase the past, but to reclaim it. That weekend, I rented tools, sledgehammer, wheelbarrow, power washer. I tore up the old pavers by hand. My back screamed the next morning, but I didn't care. I sketched plans for a new playhouse for Ellie, not one of those plastic prefab things. A real one, with shutters she could paint, a little mailbox with her name on it, and a chalkboard wall inside, where she could draw stars and dinosaurs and whatever else her wild little brain came up with. Lena helped me build it. She brought her teenage nephew along, strong, quiet kid, who didn't ask questions when I handed him a shovel and said, "We're starting over." We laid fresh sod, planted a row of sunflowers along the fence. Ellie chose the seeds herself from the nursery downtown. "These ones," she said, holding up the packet, "because they look like fireworks." Inside the house, I patched the walls Nora always said were fine enough, painted them warm tones, sage green in the hallway, eggshell in the bedrooms. I put up new lights in the kitchen, real ones, not the flickering fluorescents she never let me replace. One night, Ellie stood in the doorway of the room we used to call the guest room. She looked around at the new shelves, the soft carpet, the tiny desk I found at a thrift store and refinished in the garage. "Is this my room now?" she asked. I nodded. Her smile nearly broke me. "It feels like a tree house," she whispered. It did. No tension in the walls, no bitterness in the paint. Just light, space, and the sound of her humming as she traced shapes on the window pane. I realized then, revenge was never the point. This peace, this rebuild, was. Not loud, not triumphant, just solid, rooted. It wasn't just a house anymore. It was a home, ours. It started with the tablecloth, cream linen, embroidered edges, the one Nora insisted we keep for when people come over, even though no one ever did, unless she curated the guest list like a gala. I took it off one morning and stood there holding it in both hands. It still had a faint red wine stain from last Thanksgiving, the night she spent an hour praising Jared's dedication to mentorship, while I passed her the stuffing in silence. I folded it carefully and put it in the donation box. Then I wiped the table bare and left it like that for a week. Nothing on top, but sunlight and a coffee ring Ellie made by accident. That simple surface felt more honest than anything we'd hosted on it for years. Next came the laundry detergent. She always bought the lavender vanilla brand, said it made everything smell like hotel calm. But it didn't smell like calm to me. It smelled like masking tape, something sticky trying too hard to hold things together. So I walked into the store and stood in front of the detergent aisle for 10 full minutes. I picked cedarwood and citrus. The first time I pulled those clothes from the dryer, I held them to my face and breathed in like I'd forgotten what real air felt like. Ellie noticed too. "Smells like hugs," she said. I smiled. "Yeah, kid, it kinda does." Then I tackled the plants. Nora had a habit of bringing home greenery she couldn't take care of. Fiddle leaf figs, succulents, even a bonsai once. They always looked good for a month, and then quietly withered while she scrolled past self-care articles on her phone. There was one pothos by the kitchen sink. It had grown wild, trailing across the counter like it owned the place. I stared at it for days, couldn't decide if it was alive or just too stubborn to die. Then, one afternoon, I opened the compost bin and dropped it in. Dirt, pot, everything. Ellie watched me from the doorway. "Wasn't that Mommy's?" she asked. "It was," I said, "but it didn't belong here anymore." She didn't ask why. Instead, she pointed to the empty windowsill and said, "Can we grow strawberries there?" And just like that, we had a new project. Each habit I peeled away felt like removing a layer of paint on an old piece of wood. Messy, slow, revealing scars beneath. But those scars made sense. They told a story that felt like mine. I rearranged the mugs, donated her collection of cookbooks she never opened, unsubscribed from the meal kit deliveries she used to pretend she cooked from scratch. I even replaced the shower curtain, no more minimalist gray. Now it had cartoon otters on it, holding hands. Ellie laughed the first time she saw it. "That's silly," she said. "Exactly," I told her. It was the first time in a long time our home reflected joy, not image, truth, not performance. And every tiny change, every smell, every sound, every object she once curated, gone or replaced, was a quiet declaration. I live here now, not the version of me she wanted, but the one who survived. It was a Wednesday night. The snow hadn't fallen yet, but the sky promised it would. Ellie sat on the rug with her crayons, humming to herself, drawing something that looked like a spaceship, or maybe a unicorn wearing sunglasses. I didn't ask. That was part of our rhythm now. She'd talk when she was ready. I was folding laundry, the fresh kind, warm from the dryer, soft, smelling like cedar and lemon. I matched socks with the slow precision of a man who used to rush everything until life forced him to slow down. Ellie looked up at me, suddenly quiet. "Dad?" I glanced over, expecting a request for a snack or a missing crayon. Instead, she asked, "Is Mom coming back?" I froze, one sock still in my hand. The room went still. Not heavy, not cold, just still. She didn't sound angry, not even sad, just curious, the kind of curiosity that cuts because it doesn't know what it's cutting. I sat down beside her. The floor was warm from the heater under the boards. She leaned into me like she always did, her small body still trusting, still soft. I wrapped one arm around her and pulled her close. "I don't know, sweetheart," I said. But that was a lie. I did know. Nora wasn't coming back, at least not in the way Ellie wanted. Maybe there'd be visits, legal ones, supervised ones. But the person who used to live here? The version of her that tucked Ellie in and remembered which nightlight to turn on. That person had been gone long before the paperwork made it official. I could have told Ellie that. Could have walked her through timelines and choices and custody agreements. But she was 6. What she needed wasn't a breakdown of legal terms. She needed arms that didn't let go. So I said nothing more, just held her. Her head rested against my chest. I could feel her breathing slow, deep, steady, the way it gets when she's almost asleep but still listening. I kissed the top of her head. "You know I love you more than anything, right?" I whispered. She nodded. I didn't tell her the rest. How many nights I'd stayed up wondering if I was doing this right. How many times I'd almost called Nora just to ask what Ellie's favorite stuffed animal was when she was a baby. But I didn't call, because some answers you find by showing up, by staying. Ellie was the reason I didn't lose myself completely. The reason I held back from shouting, from slamming doors, from letting grief rot into rage. She was why I chose to rebuild instead of revenge. She shifted in my arms, looking up at me. "I like our new soap," she said. I smiled. "Me too," I said. "Smells like trees." "Like the ones in the park?" "Even better," I said. "Like the ones that don't fall down in storms." She didn't get the metaphor. Not yet. But someday she would. I held her tighter, and we sat there in the quiet, surrounded by soft socks, half-drawn unicorns, and the kind of peace you don't explain. You just protect. It happened on a Thursday. I was walking home from the bookstore with a bag of paperbacks tucked under one arm. Ellie's new obsession was dragons, and I'd promised her something with a shiny cover and glittery wings. The wind was sharp that day. Winter hadn't loosened its grip yet, and every breath felt like a reminder to keep moving forward. I was waiting at a crosswalk on 5th and Maple when I saw her. Nora. She was on the other side of the street, standing near the pharmacy awning, bundled in a beige coat that used to hang in our front closet. Her hair was tied back in a way I didn't recognize. Tighter, more reserved. Her eyes were hidden behind large sunglasses, but her posture gave her away. Stiff shoulders, hands clutched too tightly around her bag. The same posture I'd seen the night I signed those papers. She looked straight at me, or maybe past me, I couldn't tell. We stood there for a moment, long enough for the wind to sneak under my collar and make my knuckles ache from gripping the book bag. I didn't wave, didn't nod. I just stood still. And then, she turned. Quietly, deliberately. She didn't rush, didn't flinch. She just pivoted her shoulders and walked away, down the street, away from the crosswalk, away from me. There was no anger in me, no desire to chase. Only a faint echo of something that used to live between us, now faded beyond recognition. The light changed. I stepped off the curb, kept walking. Past the bakery, the shoe repair shop with the dusty neon sign, and made my way home with the books. I didn't tell Ellie I saw her, not because I was hiding anything, but because there was nothing to say. That version of Nora, the one on the sidewalk, wasn't a threat. She was just a woman carrying her choices like a heavy purse, walking away before the cold caught up. And me, I didn't follow. I had somewhere better to be. Ellie was at the kitchen table, surrounded by markers, sticker sheets, and a trail of glitter that no vacuum would ever fully defeat. The sun was setting, spilling golden light across the tile floor. Everything looked warmer than it should for a March evening. She hummed a tune she must have heard at school, the kind of melody kids latch onto and hum for weeks. I was by the sink, rinsing plates from dinner, grilled cheese and apple slices. Her request. simple, comforting. "Dad," she said suddenly, without looking up. "Come look." I dried my hands, walked over, and bent down beside her. It was a drawing, one of her clearer ones. Ellie was 6 now, her lines more confident. She'd drawn 2 people standing on grass, one tall, one small. Me and her. A house with crooked windows stood behind us, and above our heads was a giant sun, its rays touching everything. But what caught me was the color. Everything was bright. The grass was emerald, not scribbled over in brown or gray, like some of her drawings from last year. The sky was sky blue, not cloudy. She'd drawn a path leading from the house to where we stood. Wide, open, clear. And above our heads, she'd written in crooked capital letters, "Me and Dad in the light." I sat down, hard, like my knees forgot what they were supposed to do. My chest tightened, not from sadness. Not exactly. It was the kind of feeling you get when a wound finally scabs over, and you realize for the first time that healing hurts too. "You like it?" she asked. I nodded. "I love it," she grinned, missing a front tooth. "I made it for your room. You don't have anything on the walls. It looks too quiet." I looked at her, really looked. The way her eyes searched mine, not for approval, but for connection. This was her world now. This kitchen, this drawing, this moment. Not the house of raised voices or sarcasm or thinly veiled contempt. That was behind us, folded away like one of her old scribbles tucked in a drawer. "You want to hang it now?" I asked. She nodded, serious. We used tape and placed it right above my nightstand. She stood on the mattress to make sure it was straight. "There," she said. "Now when you wake up, you'll see the light." I didn't say anything for a second, because her words knocked something loose in me. Not pain, but recognition. This wasn't just her drawing. This was her declaration. Kids don't say, "I feel safe." They show you. Through open skies and bright suns and holding your hand when they don't need to. When she jumped down from the bed, I caught her midair. She laughed. I held her close, long enough for her laughter to turn into a small yawn. "Ready for story time?" I asked. "Only if it's the dragon book," she said, already crawling under the blanket. I tucked her in, read her 2 chapters, turned off the light, and stayed a minute longer than usual. As I stood in the doorway, I glanced back at her drawing, glowing softly in the moonlight, taped slightly crooked. Me and Dad in the light. Not a wish, not a dream, a fact. And for the first time in years, I believed it too. Ellie was curled beside me on the couch, wrapped in a fuzzy green blanket that smelled faintly of dryer sheets and apple shampoo. The kind of scent that feels like home, even when you can't describe why. The fireplace crackled low, not for warmth, just for the comfort of sound. Outside, snow fell in quiet spirals. Slow, patient, not rushing to cover the earth, just drifting like it had all the time in the world. And for once, so did I. In my hands was the book she'd chosen. A hardback copy of The Velveteen Rabbit, corners worn, cover a little faded. She liked this one more than the dragon stories lately. Said it was softer. Halfway through, her head leaned against my shoulder. Her breathing slowed. I didn't stop reading, not because she was listening, but because I needed the words too. Once you are real, you can't be ugly, except to people who don't understand. I paused. Her small hand tightened gently around my sleeve, like a reflex. I used to think revenge would feel like a courtroom win, or maybe a slammed door, or silence in the form of a certified check delivered by a red-faced attorney. But now I knew better. It looked like this, A kid breathing evenly beside me. A story about love and loss and becoming real again. A quiet room where nothing had to be defended. Ellie stirred, eyes barely open. "Why'd the bunny cry?" I smiled at her. "Because becoming real hurts a little." She nodded like she already knew. She didn't ask about her mom that night. Hadn't in weeks. Nora sent cards sometimes. Polite ones. Hallmark things with "love always" in her looping script. Ellie stuck them in her bookshelf between fairy tales and joke books. She didn't reread them. I never told her not to. One day, she'd make sense of it all in her own time. I didn't need to narrate that for her. She turned toward me, her voice soft and sleepy. "Are we gonna win?" I blinked. "What do you mean?" "In the story," she mumbled. "Do we win?" I pulled the blanket up to her chin and brushed her hair back from her forehead. "We didn't win," I said, and my voice surprised me with how certain it sounded. "We came back to life." She didn't respond. Not really. Just let out a quiet breath and drifted off again. And there it was, the sentence that had been circling me for months, the one I hadn't had the words for until now. We didn't win. This wasn't a scoreboard or a courtroom drama or a final mic drop moment. It wasn't about proving someone wrong or taking something back. It was about surviving the wreckage, sweeping up what was left, and finding light in the corners no one else knew existed. I turned off the lamp and sat still, holding her warmth beside me like a secret. This was our ending, or maybe our beginning. Either way, it was ours. The kind of life no one hands you. You build it. From scraps. From softness. From the decision to stay when leaving might have felt easier. The fire let out a soft pop. The snow outside whispered down onto empty streets. And I whispered back, to no one in particular. "We're home."